Is what it looks like.
Do you see them as actual, amusement parks, or do you see them as maybe machinery? You think they're amusement parks?
Well, I think the amusement parks were I see it as recharging. So they sit on the terminals.
Interesting.
And these rides were there to, for the public to enjoy. And I'm not thinking, post reset. I'm thinking pre-reset. Yeah. This was an important part of the infrastructure. And I'll be giving more examples just in this one location in New York State. So you've got this is trolley park number 1, and then you've got all these lighthouses. This one's just below where the electric park was. And that in 1967, the governor of New York at the time, Nelson Rockefeller, who was a Rockefeller, a real one, established the Hudson River Valley Commission. And then the Coast Guard took over and leased them to nonprofit historical groups to preserve them. And I'm kind of thinking there's a lot more to the story about these lighthouses than what they tell us.
Yeah. I mean,
there has to be, because they're just so impossible, because
to build the ones in the ocean
at least were built like man-made islands. Like they had to build the islands to make them, where it's just too impossible for the time period.
Indeed. Hello, Andreas. And it looks like they were built before the waters rose, right? Built on the land, and then the waters rose, and now they're in the middle of the ocean, because we've all seen the picture of that, that big lighthouse with a wave that's literally crashing over the top of it. It's like, okay, so how'd you build it?
Yeah. There's, I think there's a whole bunch of about lighthouses that are kept under wraps and that they serve a much larger purpose. And there used to be, what do I think? I'll come to that. Okay, so here's another one. Looks very similar to this one here. And then you come to another lighthouse and amusement park in Kingston, New York. So you've got this amusement park built by a steamboat company and railroad, the guy that owned them. And it was supposed to be a steamboat landing for the Hudson River Day Line and a place where trains and trolleys.
Oh, come back, Michelle.
You blocked? I couldn't hear.
Welcome, Andreas. How are you?
Oh, this is exciting. I just wanted to tune in to hear her talk about Fresnel lenses. And so researching Fresnel lenses and lighthouses. So I'm keen to hear what she has to say.
Oh, okay. The big glass discs.
Michelle, are you still there?
Michelle will be back. So tell us about Fresnel lenses.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't want to, take over, but I'll post the picture.
Just make sure you shut up.
Yeah. But looking at Fresnel lenses and lighthouses is interesting in and of itself, because these are these crazy, amazing pieces of glass that they actually chisel and they design in order to produce more light than would possibly be seen otherwise. And when you look at photophones, the idea of actually using a Fresnel lens for photophonic technology for communication, you can send an entire conversation through light, because you can actually look at the disturbances of the waves, and you could send that much further. And this was invented actually 20 years before the telegram. Bell had patented the photophone 20 years before he patented the regular phone technology, the telegram.
So these can literally be communication towers, just sending a message tower to tower.
Right. And when you think of Lord of the Rings, with the Lord of the Rings, there's that scene where they light the tower, or even in Mulan, right? They light the tower and someone sees the light and they light the other tower. It's a relay. Yeah. So these communication systems, and also they're on the coast. So I think of the giant whales again and the idea of communication.
But are they whales or are they just giants? Come on.
Right? Exactly. Vapor canopy. But just look how beautiful these pieces are. Look at the glass.
I know.
And what? We're told this is hand chiseled.
Yeah, this is amazing stuff that's being done by, the hundreds of years that went into becoming glass carvers.
Are they smooth, or are they like indented like a record?
They're smooth, but they're polished smooth so that the light can refract. So there's also a reflection that happens on one angle.
Reflection and refraction. It's nutty physics. It's really nutty physics.
I mean, imagine, because the way you also had to do this was you'd have to get a math book out, and you'd have to get one of the Masonic compasses, and you have to draw all of the angles, and you'd have to measure how light refracts off each angle, and you'd have to have that in your book, and you'd have to build all of the sheets around that. So it's crazy the amount of geometry that goes into this. And you have to remember, you're also using a pretty dull light source at the time. So to make that light source thousands of times brighter, while also you lose an f-stop by every time the light shines through the glass, some of the glass absorbs some of the light. So to be able to reflect that much light to output more light is almost like a free energy problem.
You're right.
Oh dear. Oh dear, we have lost Michelle. Oh, we got her
She's back.
Oh,
She's back.
So where was I? Where was I when you lost me?
Right beginning on Fresnel lenses and the good old
lighthouses and your theories about them. Yeah.
Lighthouses. So you just showed
that's the one you want. Okay.
One of the the house thing.
Okay, so let me go back a little bit because
and this also ties in a bit to the Captain and Mrs. Muir. Is that what it was called?
Oh yeah.
The old lighthouses.
So I was talking about these lighthouses. Was I on when I talked about the Woodcliff Pleasure Park?
I don't think we heard that one.
Okay, so I went.
You were talking about it was a ferry stop. That was a train stop as well.
Okay, so where I'm going with this is we had all these star forts up here, and
we can't. Are you sharing, Michelle? Because we can't.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Let's see here. Okay. So I showed the lighthouses up here, Kingston Amusement Park, Kingston, New York. So there's right in a series here, there were 3 historical amusement parks, trolley parks, that didn't last very long. And then we come to one in Poughkeepsie, and it's the same story. It was permanently closed in 1941. And then there was one in Orange Lake, which is just below Poughkeepsie. And, you know, we're told it was a place where people could enjoy fishing, boating, swimming, walking. The trolley line came in 1886, increased the popularity of the park. And that it was developed by the president of a particular steamship company and trolley company. All kinds of amusements, roller skating rink, snack bars, midway, Ferris wheel. And that it was forced to close for a couple of years during the Great Depression, but it was eventually dismantled in 1941 and turned into a residential community with nothing of the amusement park remaining. Typical story. And this is where I realized I wasn't with you anymore. So we've come to West Point on the Hudson River, where the military academy is, and there's 3 forts here. And what's interesting here is this is where the turn was located, and in our history we're told that there was a 75-ton great chain constructed with the reason of preventing British naval vessels from sailing upriver during the Revolutionary War between 1776 and 1778. So they constructed a 75-ton chain during the American Revolutionary War, is what we're told.
Okay.
But to me, I think that was just a story to explain the existence of a rather large chain like that.
It's Old World Florida's done a lot of work on that. There's these big stone anchors down in Florida, so I'm just wondering if there's any connection there.
And I found another chain during the Revolution or during the Civil War around Kentucky, Ohio, that area. Again, it was part of the narrative that they constructed a chain to stop the Union, you know, that kind of thing. But
yeah,
sounds
from their foundries that they had.
Sounds pretty bogus to me. Okay, so more star forts here. You've got the star bastion going here at Port Clinton. And that's another view. Oh, this is
wow.
Fort Putnam, and this is in West Point. And another fort, Fort Constitution, around West Point. Story. Okay, here's another park on the Hudson. This one has a merry-go-round, and those guys are kind of suspect too.
Yeah. And the trolley parks, most of them were built on water, weren't they? But they didn't have like water rides or anything, did they? They were just sort of.
They did. They had water rides.
They did?
Rides.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep. Shoot the chutes, things like that.
Okay.
Okay. So there's a whole story around Bear Mountain Park in New York State that is rather interesting.
Is that name again?
There's a lot of disclosure. The who was behind it. Harriman, which big in the finance world. American financier Edward Henry Harriman, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Roosevelt. I mean, they all had their fingers in this place. Railroad. Okay, so I'm just looking through here, and again, I apologize. There's a lot of information in here, and I don't want to dally. Okay, so the Croton Reservoir is this ancient-looking reservoir in New York State. You can find the same things in Europe, and then you've got this beautiful bridge here in this area. This Indian Point Park became a nuclear power plant, so we're told, while it operated. So that's this one here, Indian Point.
It was an amusement park, and they turned it into a nuclear power plant.
Right. Interesting, isn't it?
That's very interesting.
Raises my eyebrows.
Indeed. What did they find when they dug and they knocked it over, right?
Okay, so this is another place that is right across the river from the nuclear power plant that's been closed. It was permanently closed in 2021. Are you there?
Yep, we're still here.
Okay. So right across the river, it looks like another one of those harvested star forts here. So this is where the power plant was, and this is where that looks like it used to be a star fort. Okay. So there's a lighthouse I want to show you here at Stony Point, where there was supposed to have been a battle during the American Revolutionary War. So you have this nice big gate here made out of stones. Looks rather fancy. And you've got these big rocks that the reenactors are battling around. And that this place is said to have the oldest lighthouse on the Hudson River, built in 1826. But what's really interesting about this lighthouse is look at it. Looks like there's a lot more of it underneath the ground.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like, look at how buried that is. That's insane. That's like at least 2/3 got to be underground.
At least.
It's like the on Eastern Islands there. The my same amount, like proportion almost buried. I'm
How
sorry,
do they explain the point of that? It's not tall enough to be
I have to
useful.
run because it's I'm currently missing my mother-in-law's birthday dinner, so I'm gonna get murdered if I don't get there by the time that the food is coming up. But Xirtus is here to fill the last half hour or 2 hours, however long you need, Michelle. Like this is so amazing. Like by all means,
This is fascinating.
please,
I'm just trying to be
please
quiet
give
and
us
listen,
another
actually.
5 hours if you have it in you. But I will. I'll tune in a bit from my phone while being safe while driving because I do not want to miss any of this. And I will see you again on Saturday, March 25th at noon with Paul Cook as well.
Exciting.
Confirmed, correct?
All right. We'll see you.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the dinner.
I'm already in trouble. They've been there for an hour.
Godspeed, Bernie.
I couldn't miss this.
This is like that scene in Mrs. Doubtfire, but you're not in a dress, so it could be better, it could be worse. Anyway, good luck. Good luck. I wanted to say though, Michelle, this is right up our alley, and I like that you're getting down to brass tacks on lighthouses and star forts because they're clearly connected. The amusement park nuclear power plant, that is just exactly the kind of evidence that we've had suspicions about. So thank you for pointing that out. And just everywhere we go, when we look at these star forts, we're finding these amazing, both the lock and key pattern and the lighthouses. The lighthouses emerge everywhere. And I'm wondering, I guess I don't want to interrupt you because you're probably about to tell us what you think they're for beyond light, but keep going.
I want to show you this area. And so bear with me. I do have a conclusion that I will provide because it's just an absolutely fascinating area. And it's no wonder the controllers like flocked on New York in New York City. Clearly very powerful place. So I'm still going down the Hudson River here. We just passed by Stony Point. We're heading to Sleepy Hollow, where there's a lighthouse. And there's also a train line connection here. Amtrak's Empire Service and the freight today, they're still being used. And there's an old cantilever Tappan Zee Bridge. And, again, the bridges are original civilization too. So there's so much infrastructure to look into. The John D. Rockefeller Estate is also located here. So here's the Sleepy Hollow Lighthouse, and this is John D. Rockefeller's estate right here, right next to it. And so,
Of
like
course.
I said, they were definitely interested in it. It's the highest
people who
point.
sell oil, they sure love free energy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we're coming into Manhattan, and you have Fort Tryon Park, Fort George, the George Washington Bridge, Bennett Park, where Fort Washington was. On the other side, you have Fort Lee Park, and then Palisades Park was also in this area. So that's another famous trolley park. And I go through and show these different locations and the connections with the railroad to this day, because that's all part of it. And another lighthouse in this area with a story behind it right next to the bridge. So you find lighthouses right next to bridges in a lot of places. And this is at Fort Washington. You've got, masonry kind of stuff there. It was the island's highest point near the north end of Manhattan. Here, this in this stone.
Right.
And then this was a historical diagram of Fort Washington. And this is where, we're kind of getting into where the historical narrative is just like full of it.
Well, I mean, they gotta tell you, right? They say they tore down the wall, and that's Wall Street. So, I mean, they're getting there.
So Fort Washington on the Manhattan side of the Hudson was said to have been constructed to prevent the British from going upriver, starting in June of 1776 by Pennsylvania battalions of the Continental Army for George Washington. So they're building on this side, and they also built Fort Lee during that same time. At the same time, concurrently built. But what's so ridiculous is that they did all of that hard work, and in November of that same year, troops under the command of the British General Howe and Hessian General Kniphausen made short work of the American forces stationed there, captured both the forts, and took a little over 2,800 American passengers, of which only around 800 were said to have survived after being kept in substandard conditions on board British ships in New York Harbor. So they built these 2 forts in short order, and then they lost the battle anyway. You know,
and I
so
mean,
to me,
how long do they want us to think it takes to build a fort like that? I mean, it's got to take years, right?
It's just so ridiculous. I mean, of course, all these forts along the coast there they're supposed to be a century older than that, right? Also,
so I mean, to me, that's like the epitome of a ridiculous
Stupidity.
story.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay,
It's
so
just- I just can't. But I'm just amazed still at how many star forts are just popping up everywhere.
Right.
Everywhere.
Right.
They saw Fort Anne, right, in LiDAR. So there was an approach of forts that they used LiDAR recently, and they found that going from Canada, from the Hudson Bay down into New York, you can follow the forts. The weird part is there are more forts to the west than the east. So it doesn't really seem like, they started in the west from the British and they.
Okay, it comes
It's
the other
more that
way across.
they're coming from the west, as if they found themselves in Fortlands and then they took them over, right?
Exactly.
yeah, and I'll have a whole picture here by the time I'm done with this. So you've got another trolley park in this area, Fort George, that was said to have operated from 1895 to 1914. Pretty well developed thing, and you still have the same, kind of stories. It was built for the trolley line and wanted to give people a reason to use their trolley services on weekends and draw residents of Manhattan to the riverside for summer recreation.
It's crazy.
when
1894 is the same as 1994. These amusement parks and electric trolleys and lights on the streets at night.
So they had all kinds of things, rides, casinos, the speedway, and the speedways were part of this grid system, vaudeville shows. But then they had to close the park because the local residents were upset with all of the social problems that was stemmed from the park. So they closed it.
Wow.
For public drunkenness and high crime.
Suspicious much?
And then there was a fire in 1911. They opened the park, but then I think there was another fire that devastated the park 2 years later, and so they finally condemned it. And then if you look, this is the Harlem River, and you see masonry banks here.
Yeah.
So, canal. They're all canals.
Moors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
what I believe.
Are electric parks the same as lunar parks? Do you find? Is there any difference, or is it the same?
I'll be giving an example that'll touch on that.
Epic. I really quickly want to ask you: do you connect beer gardens with these power plant amusement parks?
I haven't looked for beer gardens specifically, but given that they were selectively lowering our collective consciousness by providing all of this alcohol, and putting it into a context of having fun and all of this other stuff, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, to me, they just completely reverse engineered the energy grid system into a control system.
Yeah.
For the purposes of harvesting our energy and any available energy.
The quick example I was thinking of is because I'm from Santa Cruz, California. We have the boardwalk, which has got the oldest roller coaster, and we've got the oldest log ride. And you're like, wait a second, roller coaster? That looks like the Gold Rush carts in Indiana Jones. Log ride. Oh well, log ride in California. That's because they literally put logs on all these amusement park rides, so to speak. Using this energy. They're all based on the destruction of the West later on, right? These are these actual infrastructural tools that were being used, and we have a memory of when they were tearing things apart. Those are the rides.
And I do believe that these were built by the original civilization for good, for
mining and actual purposes, and for environment, yes,
and for energy. I think it was part of the grid system, and these trolley parks possibly recharged it somehow. Because they were always at the end of trolley lines. So, and they were just restarted by the controllers and turned into a different. I mean, it was still for fun, but it was to make money. It was to, they had their vaudeville shows and their casinos, and so they all just incorporated it into their gigantic money-making efforts and distraction efforts, so we wouldn't know what was happening
But
to us.
the money's why the story doesn't make sense. I mean, we're talking about they're trying to collect, trolley fare, right? Which would have been nothing.
Right. Well, but also
there's
the beer.
They have to build this big park up, right? And then they destroy it, and that's more expensive.
That's also the reason I found interesting the beer gardens, because a lot of these lower alcohol content, earlier beers in the 18th century that were considered medicinal health drinks, like Reinheitsgebot beers, weren't as intense. And after the Prohibition, you see people putting, spirits in bicycle tires, and then that's how cocktails emerge. But they weren't drinking cocktails at that point, and they were kind of like kombucha. So you go to a place where there's a medicinal fermented carbonated drink, and you've got all sorts of recreational activities, and they're producing energy in the process, which is being used to make these light towers at the center of the town, which is illuminating the entire town, so no one's in the shadows. It's safer. I mean, it seems like it's a major part of the infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, there's places like Council Bluffs in Iowa that, if you look at historic pictures, they had what was called a moon tower in it back around the turn of the century, turn of the 20th century or whatever.
Pretty similar to Lighthouse, actually, the Fresnel lenses in the moon towers.
Yeah, and that they were taken down for some BS reason. Things like that.
Have a moon anymore.
It's interesting that there'd be a lighthouse, essentially, but in the middle of a town. Right. A moon tower is very interesting.
Yeah. And I would surmise that all of the infrastructure had some kind of relationship with, the sun and the moon and the elements, and, just working harmoniously with each other, symbiotically. I think everything was perfectly aligned geometrically and on Earth and the heavens, and, and I see it from ancient times to modern times. So I believe something happened relatively recently that totally destroyed everything.
Yeah.
Turned it upside down.
It's funny. So many people are comfortable with the idea of the apocalypse now. It just had to be 5,000 to 10,000 years ago. It's not allowed to have happened recently. We can't handle that, but they're getting closer.
And what's so interesting is that where I live in Arizona, I mean, you can just step outside the front door and just see the evidence. I mean, but people don't see it because of John Wayne and.
God, how far are you from the petrified forest in Arizona?
I'm probably 2 hours, something.
I mean,
like
it's
that.
just so crazy. It's not that far, and if you think about these giant trees and the idea that it's all there in Arizona, it's amazing. Even the name Arid Zone kind of sounds like Fallout after a nuclear attack, doesn't it?
Oh. And there's, the R sound, AR, Tartaria, Barbaria.
Right.
It's like the Aryans. I think the Aryans are the same.
Yeah.
And,
nobility rate.
And when the whole Nazi thing came in, it's like after they destroyed the original civilization, they wanted to create their own version of Superman. When when humanity was already there.
Well, the Ashkenazi, Anastasi. Wow, 20 Freudian slip. The Anastasi, are they in Arizona? Right? They were
the
before
ancient
they disappeared.
Ones.
Right.
But again,
and they have locust gods, Kokopelli. They have the idea of insectoid super soldiers that are living underground. So.
and again, when you talk about the ancient ones, from what I know, they're still with us. They're ancient humans still alive today, and those would be the Moors. And so they want to put everything way far back, but in reality, they've gone after the original humans that have a strong connection with the creator and tried to replace humanity with this version of them.
Right. Ancient is very recent, because ancient is just prehistory. I mean, realistically, CNN isn't history. We don't know what happened yesterday, let alone 400 years ago. Not honestly.
And just for example, where I live, I mean, there's a crazy amount of water groundwater underneath the surface. Crazy amount. But it's called the Sinagua people that were here, because when you look at the landscape, it looks dry, and we do get rain here, but it's not like all the time. but so they tell us it's Sinagua and that something happened to the Anasazi. But there's plenty of water here.
Right. No, the disappearance of the Anastasi's one of the craziest stories. When you look at some of the other nations that existed in the Western Hemisphere at the same time, they all, like the Quechua, the Lakota, they all have stories, the Hopi, about going underground. And some of the stories I'd heard as a kid, like I think the History Channel or Sci-Fi, were like, did the Anastasi leave in a flying saucer? This is way before Ancient Aliens. You know, they were trying to make it seem crazy. But seriously, the idea that they went underground to survive some sort of a disaster, or they left that architectural monument to go elsewhere, I don't know where else they would go unless they got on. I mean, it just seems more likely that they went underground for a century like the Quechua did.
Yeah, I think it's all important to take that into consideration. The Hopi have an emergence legend of coming out of the Sipapu and the Grand Canyon.
Right.
And, you know, going underground and being taken care of by the ant people. And of course, they're ancient people too. So what I remember a long time ago before I started my own journey is that, and it might have been a book I read, you know, in the 1990s. I started looking for information. And what I remember that really struck me is that the Hopi said that the new civilization was built on top of the old. And I didn't really have any idea at that time what that could have possibly meant. But now I do. So did they go underground when this took place? And I think that probably happened for a lot of ancient people that they went
not trying to
underground.
share that screen necessarily, but that my first thought was Gondahar. I'm sorry. I don't know if you ever saw that movie. Have you ever seen Gondahar?
No.
So have you ever seen Fantastic Planet, the French cartoon with the blue aliens? The guy made Gondahar. Gondahar starts out by saying, in the future, we won't be able to stop it because it already happened and the past couldn't have happened without the future. I'm kind of paraphrasing. But this has been the push I've seen recently. Dave Chappelle, the astronauts from NASA, talking about UFOs are really time traveling us. It's just us in the future. And that some of these insectoids, well, those are probably genetically modified human super soldiers from, you know, China or the United States military in the future. And they're living underground in the past because if they were to live in the surface, it would affect the butterfly effect. So underground, then if there's a natural disaster, they might be able to raise our ancient people up for this coming reset, which sounds kind of crazy, but also reminds me of Cynthia Sue Larson and the Mandela effect and the linear accelerator and a lot of the work that China, the United States, the Soviet Union, Switzerland have put into controlling causality, that we might actually be connected to the past and the future. And this idea of alien might actually just be us in some other respect. Might be far off, but I was thinking Gandahar because he said that.
Yeah. You know, I just think it's important to consider all possibilities because as crazy as different things sound, it's not nearly as crazy as what's happened here.
And definitely not nearly as crazy as what they try to teach. What they try to teach in school is definitely crazier. Right, exactly.
You know, so give it your best shot. So I'll just quicken this up. So there's another star fort here. It had Roosevelt fingerprints over what happened to it. Yeah, so they're involved in different things going on. There's another Palisades Park here, very famous. Bruce Springsteen popularized it in a song, I believe. And this was a really popular park. And you see the trolley cars down at the bottom and then they go on up to the top.
It's called Palisades Park. It's weird to me. They keep renaming places Palisades. So like Squaw Valley, you're not allowed to. This sounds racist. So now they're going to call it Palisades. Palisades has renamed about 4 of the recently renamed cities that I can think of, or colleges.
You know, it's the biggest cover up there is. You know, forget aliens, forget flat Earth. You know, what has happened, that doesn't even begin to cover the lies that we've been told.
Do you know what a
And
palisade
so-
is actually? A palisade is a
No,
paling
no.
or a stake wall or a moor. Exactly, a wall.
Yeah, it's
Or a more interesting.
yeah, it's the moors are the biggest cover up, but anyway. So
I agree.
So anyway, I built on some other research that I did and that I incorporated in here. Most people know by now that the Statue of Liberty is on the Starfort, and the Statue of Liberty is also a lighthouse. Worked as a lighthouse for a while between 1886 and 1901, and you can see this solar alignment with the torch.
It's interesting because when I first jumped in, you were talking about lighthouses. My first thought was the Colossus of Rhodes, right? Because the Colossus of Rhodes serves as a lighthouse as well.
It's on an artificial island. Lots of those around. But I'll cut to the chase here. Hang on. Lots here. This is on my website. If you want to go back and look at it, Starforts, Gone By Trolley Parks and Lighthouses of New York's Hudson River Valley and New York Bays. It's also on my YouTube channel. Okay, what do I think? I think lighthouses are the distribution of the energy. I think they're the distribution system.
Okay, so wireless sort of beaming it from point to point kind of thing.
I'm going to show you another picture. Hopefully, let's see. I get all confused. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'm going to present. Try to figure out where my picture is.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Let's see. I don't know if this is it. No. I'm not used to this one.
That's all right.
I've got a picture on my desktop of a lighthouse in Turkey where the light is just a very powerful. Let me find it. I think I can do it here.
And then we have like the Eiffel Tower.
Do you remember where it is in Turkey? If it's the Alanya Lighthouse or an older one?
No. Shoot.
Alanya.
Maybe I can find it that way. It's the Turku. It's a particular picture of the Turgutreis Lighthouse. So it's Turgutreis Lighthouse, and it's a particular picture. It like showed up on my feed, and then I went. Okay, so there's one. There's one here where it shows, but there's another one where there's just light just coming out of it.
Oh, so it's like almost that one. So the sun's shining through it.
It's similar. It's similar, but it's even more dramatic than that.
And so these are okay. So there's solar alignments as well.
So there's solar alignments. That is very typical. Maybe video file is what I'm looking for. I'll find it, guys.
And see.
Definitely there's something to this because I remember when Bernie had, who was it who builds lasers on our channel?
Jeremiah and his friend at the laser shop.
Right, his friend is the name I couldn't remember. But yeah, I mean, awesome guy. Building lasers, a lot of the time you'll use lenses.
It was our New Year's
light.
It looks like a horizontal laser and a vertical laser from that particular lighthouse in Turkey. And
okay, so oh wow, okay, so if it's if they're all in solar alignments and all linked up, do you think that there was at certain times and events during the year that would shine through, the sun would go through one of the lenses and then you'd have like this instant kind of information, right? Grid turn
something
on, you?
Something along those lines. They were in alignment with each other.
It's wow.
And
because I mean,
and so
they tell us they've got everyone thinking that sun worship is bad. I mean, but Look at this, right? Clearly, it's all based on the sun, right? How the
I
sun
feel like
gets
it's
there.
sun and moon, though, right? Sun and it's
Try
the
to
problem
put
is
out.
when I think the problem is when they think it's one or the other, and really it's not. Like it's one's good and the other's evil. It's that you need both
Well,
in
that's a
order to
good
have the
point.
order
It
of the
wasn't
day and the
sun
night.
worship; it was sun and moon, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Right.
they definitely had a
So
festival at
so
the winter solstice too.
there was the last comment that you had.
Yes.
The last comment that you had fit it. What I think it was they were part of the energy distribution system, and it was way more as navigational aid. I think they were transmitting all the energy that was generated by the star forts and the trolley parks and so forth, and just nothing like what we're told. So if we
No.
go back to
Good
what
job.
I found, so between the entrance to the lower New York Bay at the Atlantic Ocean to the locations around the George Washington Bridge across the Hudson River, I specifically looked at 11 star forts that are in pairs or clusters, 5 major historic trolley amusement parks, and 11 lighthouses. And that was just from here to here. And remember, I started way north of there. This is, once you get into Manhattan, and I was showing you further upriver, and you saw all the lighthouses and the star forts and the electric parks. So to me, this was like a major spot on the Earth's grid system. And then if you look at San Francisco, you find a lot of the same characteristics with lighthouses and bridges.
Yeah.
All the way
and
to
so forth.
Monterey, right?
There's a lot that down near sort of Texas, Galveston, going up through whatever that river port thing is, inlet.
Right. So I just invite people to kind of look some of this stuff up on my website and my YouTube channel, because a lot of times I'll go into a place with no, expectations of what I'm going to find, and then when I start doing the research, all this other stuff comes out. And it's like when you put your attention on something, it's like the information wants to come back. And so kind of poking around these types of topics is yielding a lot of information, because it's not hard to start poking holes in the narrative about what they tell us, and to see the interconnections between all of this infrastructure and the lighthouses line up with each other and things like that. So I think they're, it's all part of an interconnected system, and it was all over the Earth, and it was all part of generating free energy. And I kind of see Earth as a grand central station of the universe, and that I think it went beyond here. I think it was benefiting everywhere. That's just speculation on my part, but
I agree with that. I resonate with that.
Nucleus. Wow.
So
maybe that's what
evil came in and crashed the party. And so we want that. This is our chance.
Yeah. I mean, it was a takeover. And I was just thinking before, isn't it interesting that that's such a part of our culture that we've been brought up with, is all these alien invasion stuff, I mean, is that even normal for a civilization to think about? Like, where did that come from? And it's probably because it's already happened, right? But of course, they always show us the ways that it happens is not, they didn't come in, well, they probably did come in guns a-blazing, but they love to hide in the shadows with their control, right? They're not out the front saying, woohoo, we're controlling you, because that clearly wouldn't work, I guess. There we go. You got any comments on this situation, Mr. Xirtus?
I mean, I want to go back and watch a lot of Michelle's videos, and I want to also think about, there's a guy who does these old amusement park videos, lost amusement parks or amusement parks that fell apart. And he did some videos about 19th century amusement parks and beer gardens. And I want to compare some of my thoughts on the destruction of these families, because a lot of these guys had a beer garden, and then there was something that happened where their family was destroyed and the entire town was taken over by a specific group, usually the Carnegies or Rockefellers. So I wonder about that. It feels like the way the CIA used Pinochet or Noriega or Saddam Hussein, like, you go in there and kill a bunch of people and we'll come in and kill you when everything's all settled, you know? And so I wonder about the transitionary period of these free energy towers and the way that for a while it seems like people were still trying to hold on and use them after whatever it seems like happened. Because it does seem like there's some sort of an end to the harmony. And I agree with Michelle that there was some sort of natural or even synthetically assisted harmony through our community. I've done some interviews with people talking about Reiki and technology, building cloud busting machines, and they've talked about how the emotionality of the community where that cloud busting machine is set up can affect the cloud busting machine. And I think that that's another interesting thing about amusement parks. That's something, you know, to consider is human emotion, the magnetism of thoughts or the field of EMF of thoughts. How are we affecting each other? And how can we maybe make, through sociological control, a society more healthy? I mean, that sounds kind of like what a pyramid is. And when we say pyramid, we have to remember also a pyramid and a lighthouse are etymologically the same thing. There's light on the inside of the pyre is on the inside of this edifice. So there's a lot more connection here than I think we even realize, and we have to keep digging further. But it's amazing stuff. And Michelle, I love that so much of everything that you have is cited. You've got evidence to all the things you're talking about, and you are very coy to tell us your hypothesis until you've shown us all of your data, and that's amazing. So I appreciate that.
Well said.
And of course, I just showed you, kind of skipped over a lot of parts, but I have a very detail-oriented mind.
Right.
So even when I want to hurry through something, you know, I can't.
No, I mean, the point is you have the data, and if anything, if anyone feels like they need more, you can go to Michelle's channel. You can see there's actually a lot of videos about these subjects, and they're broken up into different videos. So it's actually pretty convenient to start studying these things and to ask these questions and to research them yourself. But I also appreciate your effort to say, look, to suffice it to say, here's what I'm looking at right now. Here's what I'm working on. It's a great taste into your world. So I appreciate that.
And also piercingtheveilofillusion.com.
Right.
Did Bernie, the late mum-in-law's birthday dinner, have something to say? Driving wildly down the road, trying to not get in trouble. No, these.
You better be careful, because you know how there's snow on those roads and salt on that snow. I know how it works.
Yes.
We actually have a Chinook right now, which is rare. That I guess winter's almost over, but it's still technically winter. But it became plus.
Did you call it a Chinooker? What's a Chinooker? That's a whole. That sounds dirty.
Yeah, it sounds like someone who walks down the street and charges you money for different weather or something.
Yeah, right. Canadians are all like that, though. They'll always be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry about the weather." And I'm like, "Did you forget to pay for the heat? Like, what do you mean? You're sorry."
Canada? Yeah. Anyway, all right. So we've hit 2 hours and 10 minutes. So thank you very much for your time, Michelle. As was mentioned before, there's going to be a chat between Michelle and Paul this next Saturday. Is that right? Not this coming Saturday, but the next one, I think.
25th.
25th. There we go. So keep your eye out for that. Thanks for coming in, Andreas.
Thanks for
running away, Bernie. And thank you to everyone in the chat and to everyone who donated and supported with donations, and everyone who didn't, we support. We love you as well. So jump over, check out Michelle's work, give her a subscribe, a like, all that good stuff. And thanks again, guys. And we will catch you all on the next upload.
Or on OnlyCams.
Hang on. What was that? No, all right.
Only on OnlyCams.
Yes, exactly. Ciao for now.
All right, good night, everybody.